Welcome all of you to this first ever statewide Handle with Care presentation. My name is Rob Reed. I'm with the Pennsylvania Office of Attorney General. Yeah, that's me. And I want you to know that I speak on behalf of the Pennsylvania Office of Attorney General. We are in the last week of Attorney General Josh Shapiro's tenure as Attorney General, and we're going to be transitioning next week on Tuesday to Michelle Henry, who is wonderful, known her for more than 20 years, and she will be the new Attorney General. I have to tell you that this day has been a long time in coming because we in the AG's office and others around the state have recognized that Handle with Care is a very important and extraordinarily helpful program that should be embedded, in my view, in every school district and police department around the Commonwealth. And I will just tell you that in short, and you're going to hear much more later about what Handle with Care is, but it really, in very brief summary, provides school officials with a heads up when a child has been identified at the scene of a traumatic event and involving law enforcement. And it's really, the goal is to not re-traumatize children who have been exposed to trauma or adversity. And it's to help children and ultimately their families succeed in school and in their life. Excuse me. I can't go any further. I have to say this, that this event would never have happened but for Beth Tomlinson. Beth, as you will hear from later, is the Senior Director of Community Resilience at United Way in the Lehigh Valley. She is passionate and extraordinary, and she and I have spoken about this initiative. And the bottom line is Beth is, in my view, the go-to person in Pennsylvania about how to put together a trauma-informed coalition to create trauma-informed schools, to do just about everything trauma-informed. As a matter of fact, sometimes I can just hear her saying, "Rob, that's not trauma-informed." No, but all seriousness, a lot of, well, really, I think all the credit goes to Beth for making this happen. So let me just say this, that we're very excited that you're all here. We have, I believe, exactly 100 people, which, of course, why wouldn't you have 100 people? So, and I'm hoping that you will take this understanding education back with you to your school districts, to your police departments, to your communities, and say, this is a no-brainer. This isn't even a hard sell. So that's one thing I'd like to say. The second is, please mute yourself. So I know that what happens is sometimes you don't realize it, you unmute, and then we hear your conversation with your kids, your dogs, whatever. If you could just mute yourself, that would be really great. So where we are is that we are going to give you some Zoom questions, Zoom poll questions. I'm not a technological guy. So I think that we're going to have coming up on the screen are poll questions. There you go. And it says Rob Reed to introduce. So that's what I'm doing. So we want you to decide what best describes your community. Are you urban, suburban, or rural? And then secondly, the second question is, where would you put yourself along the Handle with Care implementation continuum? So it could be that before I mentioned Handle with Care, you had never heard about it before, and now you're curious, or you're in a position to say you're curious to better understand the program, you're interested in piloting this program in my community, you recently launched Handle with Care in your community, or you've been implementing Handle with Care for some time and can't understand why anyone else isn't doing it. No, that's not in the question. But anyway, the bottom line is that if you can answer these, we're going to give you a few more seconds. That's why I continue to babble. And let's see, I'll kind of add these things up. This is like watching the House of Representatives vote on Speaker for the House. Oh, anyway, I shouldn't say it. So let's see. We're almost approaching 100. I think we're close. So it looks like the winner on question 1, and we have 68, 80 responses, 81 responses, that it's most of the people are from the suburban part of the state. And it's about half of the people on the call, and 12 out of 14% from urban, and 35% from rural. I'm sorry, it's 14% from urban, 35% from rural. I can read. All right, and then with respect to question 2, let's see, what do we have? So almost a third, or actually a third of you have never heard about Handle with Care before.
I'm sorry, let me just.
Yes? Oh, okay. I thought you were saying something. That means that this is a great opportunity to learn about a program, and that I think you will find is, again, a great program. It's commonsensical, and it's really not that hard to implement. 41% are curious to better understand if this program is right for you. 15% interested in piloting this program. 4% recently launched it, but only 7% have been implementing Handle with Care for some time. So we want to flip these numbers, and we want to, I would be great to say in a year from now, we have 41% have been implementing Handle with Care. So that's the goal of this effort. I think that that's a really, really good start to at least know where you're coming from. Okay, so I think we've done the poll, and what I'd like to do is move quickly to Dana Milakovic, who is a friend, but she's also with the Office of Safe Schools, the Department of Education, and she is she's a mental wellness and trauma specialist. She's on an effort called Heal PA. She's on the Executive Steering Council to create a trauma-informed Pennsylvania. And she is going to speak about the basics of trauma. So let me turn it over to Dana. Take it over.
Thanks, Rob. The basics of trauma in 15 minutes, because I want to make sure we have time for Heal PA. Oh my gosh, see, there you go, Rob, for working on Handle with Care. Why am I talking about trauma today? That's really our goal. Why bother? And I want to talk about partnerships. I think if we talk about Handle with Care, it's all about partnerships. You can't do it individually. It matters that we talk about it as, how do we do this as a community? How do we do this as a police force? And how do we do this as a school? And we really integrate those partnerships together. So that's what I'm going to talk about. Next slide. But if we kind of back up and we talk about why do we need Handle with Care, it would be lovely to exist in a unicorn and rainbow world, which sometimes I do, pretend I live there, where we don't have any trauma. We have no adverse childhood experiences. Our youth don't experience anything negative. They're never abused. There's never domestic violence. We never have substance use in the home. We never have mental health problems that result in some incidences requiring law enforcement coming into the home. But the reality is that we know 1 out of 3 to 2 out of 3, depending on where you are in the United States and in Pennsylvania, experience an adverse childhood experience. If we go to the next slide, the ones on this slide were originally identified in a study in the 90s with Kaiser Permanente and the Center for Disease Control. And they really looked at these 10 things that youth experienced and said, hey, thinking back onto your childhood, did you ever experience them? And you rated them yes or no, and you got an ACE score, which was how many you experienced. And then they really correlated that to say, okay, what does your life look like now as an adult? What do your relationships look like? What does your mental health look like? What does your physical health look like? Are you using substances in an inappropriate way? And they found that there is this lasting adverse impact. And so the more ACEs you have, the more impact it has on you as an adult. I am a data dork, so I say that with no issues whatsoever. And so when we develop research studies, we really start with something, and they started with those 10, and we know that's not the end all be all. So as things have progressed, we've really started thinking about what does that look like now? What are our youth experiencing now? And if you go to the next slide, it's led to this conversation about there's really a pair of ACEs. So when we think about those 10 things at the top, and we know that they're tied to adverse community environments. And so sometimes we get into that kind of thought when we hear adverse community environments and we're thinking about increased violence and socioeconomic status and that lack of mobility and discrimination. We immediately go to, we're going to focus on an urban setting, and this doesn't apply to me if I live in rural. I've heard that said, and I want to put that out there for this applies to everybody. It doesn't matter where you are in the United States. It doesn't matter where you are in Pennsylvania. This applies to you. We have youth who are experiencing things that we don't know about, that happens in their home. And when we don't have programs such as Handle with Care, what happens in home stays in the home. And doesn't get communicated to the school. And the reason we want to focus on that is because if we go to the next slide, what we know in Pennsylvania is we're really focused on how do we become a trauma-informed state. And as Rob said, I am part of HEAL PA as well. And that came out of the Pennsylvania Trauma-Informed Plan. If you are not familiar with that, when I am done talking, I will put a link to HEAL PA in our chat so that you can access the trauma-informed plan and the work that we're doing. But what also happened at that time in the educator space is there were these legislative updates that hit the schools and said, hey, you need to be focusing on trauma-informed practices. You need to think about how are you integrating trauma-informed practices into your school? How are you training on trauma? And you need to be training on it. And so we had these listening sessions and we really started focusing on what trauma-informed integration looks like. And next slide. The reason we did that in part was because it was legislatively mandated, but in another part is to think about what does it mean to have experienced trauma? And the reason I break out the definition for trauma into 3 parts is because when we think about a traumatic event, we have to think about it from the perspective of that individual, not from our perspective. So when we're thinking about an event that occurred in a child's life, let's think about the police being called because there's a domestic violence incident. We know that that can be impactful to that youth. That youth may think, this is normal. I'm not visibly upset about this. This is just the way things are. And so I'm not traumatized by this. And so the goal of thinking about a Handle with Care and partnerships is not about assigning trauma to an individual, assigning trauma to a family or to a youth. It's about saying, we don't know what's going on, but something happened. Something happened that was harmful to our youth or could potentially be harmful. And it's up to them how they interpret it. When we think about the impact trauma has, if we go to the next slide, we think about it from multiple perspectives. So in the education space, if we think about it from a youth perspective, we have a ton of data from the Pennsylvania Youth Survey that talks about what could potentially be traumatizing to our youth. So we have mental health concerns, we have sadness, we have depression, we have suicide attempts. We have cyberbullying, we have safety in our school concerns, we have students experiencing bullying. And when we think about those type of events happening in the community and in school, we know that we need that partnership between police and schools. But we also know that sometimes when we think about potential ACEs like the ones at the bottom, I was injured by another person, so I was emotionally abused. I don't have time to kind of take a poll of what emotional abuse means, but let me tell you that when we ask this question, we're saying to our youth, hey, how many times have people insulted you in your life, called you names, said negative things to you? 68% of our youth is experiencing incidents where they're being told they're something negative. They're being called names. That isn't happening completely in the school setting. That's happening in the community and home as well. Same with our physical injury and then experiencing that death of a friend or family member, 37% of our youth. So we have a lot of incidences occurring in our youth's lives that could be traumatic for our youth. And we don't always know about them in the educational world, but law enforcement often knows about what's happening in the community and these type of adverse childhood experiences. Next slide. From the educator's perspective, this slide is from a study that was done by the McDowell Institute in partnership with what was Bloomsburg University and is now Commonwealth Universities in partnerships with the Pennsylvania Department of Ed. And they asked educators, do you think it's important to talk about trauma? Do you think it's important to learn about trauma? Do you think it's important to be able to talk about emotions? And what we found is that, yeah, educators want to know about trauma. They feel like they need to be prepared and educated, but they don't know how to talk to students who are struggling. And so when we think about a student who had something occur in the community or the home the night before, and law enforcement came and they're now upset. They come to school, they're upset, they're having a bad day, and we already don't feel prepared to talk to them about their emotions. And now we also have zero idea that anything happened in the community or the home last night. We're in this cycle where we're having conversations, they're upset, we are not understanding why they're upset, so we get more upset, then they get more upset. And when we think about how to disrupt that, we think about partnerships. So I just want you to imagine for a second how that scenario could be different if Rob's my local law enforcement officer, and he responded to an incident in in a child's home last night, and he just sends me a message that says, hey, Mary may be having a bad day today. Something happened last night and she may be struggling. Just be aware she might be upset. How do I then come into that day to say, yeah, she's sleeping. Yes, she's grouchy. She's snapping at me. She's rolling her eyes. I'm not as reactive because I have knowledge that I need to be prepared for that. And that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about these partnerships. We're not talking about law enforcement coming in and saying, oh my gosh, Dana, guess what happened last night, and giving all this information. We're really just saying, hey, heads up, they might be having a rough day. And if we go to the next slide, we can look at like why that's important. So when we think about these trauma-informed values from a Department of Education standpoint, we're really looking at how these all integrate together.
I don't know anything about it really, the Handle with Care program.
I apologize. Oh, thank you. I had to pause for a second. Sorry, I got distracted. So when we think about the trauma-informed care values, we really want to think about how do we integrate all these together? And when we think about partnerships, we think about that safety factors. So safety with Handle with Care is a big one for me. I'm not just talking about physical safety, but I'm talking about that psychological safety, that social safety and emotional safety that I know my child's going to be taken care of if something happens in my home, but all my information is not going to be out there and everyone's not going to know all of my business, but they are going to know that my child needs extra support. So thinking about that and really tying it in with our families and communities and building that coalition together, inviting individuals in for that collaboration and allowing them to have a voice. Next slide. And we want to do that because whether we're terming this trauma, we're going to term this toxic stress, what we know is that we experience stress every single day. So some of it is positive. Positive stress is just those little things that happen during the day where our brains kind of go, oh my gosh, for a minute, and then they settle back down pretty quickly and they don't really need external support. That could be, I dropped my cup on the floor, I started a new job, I met someone new, all of those things are more positive stress. This tolerable stress and toxic stress, I just want to tie together because both of them, there's something that happens in your life and it's something that really impacts your brain. And your brain goes into this state where it's not able to learn, it's not able to think, it's not able to function. And that happens whether you are an adult or you are a child. The difference between tolerable and toxic stress is not the time that occurs or even how intensive the situation was. It's what relationships and social support do you have in your life and what is able to be provided to you. That's what really creates the difference between them. So when we create systems where we embed at an adult level a relationship for everyone to come in and support our youth, we're allowing them to move from this toxic stress to this tolerable stress area more readily. And that allows their brain to come down for a little bit. It really gives their brain a break, basically, from all the stress hormones that are flying at it and impacting them. And next slide. This matters because when we don't get that break, our brain stays in this fight, flight, or freeze mode. And we know that with many of our youth, they don't go to the freeze, they go to the fight or the flight. And it really escalates into these situations. We start talking about what does it look like with future law enforcement involvement? What does it look like in terms of juvenile probation? Are we increasing our rates of expulsions and suspensions and punitive consequences? So our goal when we think about programs like Handle with Care is to really impact our youth by impacting the adults, sharing information and partnering so that we're able to disrupt this fight, flight, or freeze response. If we go to the next slide. For our educators, that's really important because when we have our students come into school, our goal in the school setting, obviously, is to create the best adult that we can when they leave us. We're developing social skills, we're helping them self-regulate, we're helping them learn academics, we're helping them learn to advocate for themselves. And when we have students who come in that have been significantly impacted by trauma and we're not intervening, what we find is that their brain is not available to our educators to build those relationships. Their brain is so focused on that fight and flight and just survival. And when we don't, as educators or any adult in the school setting, give them a break when they need it, when they come in and they're having a really bad day because of something that happened, we actually teach them that we are not safe, that they have to be in survival mode around us. And we develop this escalation cycle in the school setting, which I know I'm on a limited time, so I'm not going to go off on a tangent about. But it's really important to think about, this isn't just a program that we want to say, yes, we want it everywhere. It makes common sense. Rob is very focused on the common sense part of it. I am very focused on the partnership and neurological part of it. It makes sense because it helps our children's brains. And that is really important for us as we think about moving forward. Next slide. This is my brain one that I'm gonna just leave here, and we are gonna give you access to the slides, I believe. So I'm gonna just really highlight some things on here. But what we know is that when you've experienced traumatic events, there's an impact on development. And when we think about brains, I can't take a scan of a brain and say, oh, Dana's experienced one traumatic event in her life. Oh, we're going to scan Rob's brain. Oh, he's experienced 2. We're going to scan Beth's brain. She's experienced 0. Our brains don't work like that. So it really does involve the partnerships and the relationships we have as youth. And so what we know is that one traumatic event can significantly impact a child, whereas another traumatic event may not impact another child at all. And so it's really important to think about, since I can't plan which traumatic events are going to be impactful, we partner as adults so that I can reduce the impact that it has when they're with me in the school setting. And you go to the next slide. But they're not with me in the school setting all the time. And so this is just a slide to think about the healing focus and why we focus on things like partnering with Handle with Care, because we always have the child at the epicenter. And so I love, I know Rob wants us to be on mute, and obviously we want that for our speakers, but I loved the fact that we heard a child at the beginning of this, because that's why we're here. We're here for those children. And so when we think about our children and how we all partner together and merge through all of these different levels, we think about how do we have a healing focus, and that involves us partnering together. And so if you go to the next slide, this just builds out on that. When we look at trauma-informed education, so my middle part is my school system. thinking about what does your multi-tiered system of support look like? How are you creating senses of belonging and staff training around trauma, and thinking about an organizational wellness that impacts our adult wellness to impact our student wellness, so our adults are able to be regulated, and think about the systems condition. We want to build out that community partnership. So when we think about community partnerships, we're thinking about how do we partner within the community with our law enforcement, with our nonprofits, with our medical systems. How do we all partner together so that ultimately we're supporting our staff to support our students, because at the core of it is our students. And for my last slide, this is my why. When I think about Handle with Care, this is why. We know that regardless of what study you look at that looks at resiliency building in our students, we know that a safe, stable, and supportive relationship with a caring adult is the #1 protective factor for our youth. And so if we can partner together to help them overcome adversity and help them deal with traumatic events and things that happen in their life in a supportive, caring way, I know that we're able to impact their future development and really change their trajectory for life. This is my why from a professional standpoint. It's also my why from a personal standpoint. And so I think that when we move forward with that, we just really need to think about how do we partner. And so I invite you as the future speakers who are going to talk after me and the panel to really think about not the barriers to implementing programs, but how we can do it and how we can all partner together to make this happen in all of our communities.
That was, thank you so much. And for everyone on this Zoom call, let me say that what you just heard in 15 or so minutes was unbelievable. I don't think I've ever heard a better presentation in 15 minutes. I know that that would have taken me 5 hours to say. So thank you, Dana. And also the reason that Dana says that I'm focused on the common sense side and she's focused on the neurological side is because I don't understand the neurological side. So anyway, let me just also say that Dana had a slide on trauma-informed education. Referring back to HEAL PA, we're interested in making all our systems trauma-informed, including the criminal justice system. And I will put in the link or in the chat a link to a report that was issued by HEAL PA and the criminal justice team within it on creating a trauma-informed criminal justice system. So the bottom line is we're interested in all of our systems being trauma-informed. So anyway, so let's move on. And what I'd like to do, and thanks again to Dana, it was great. So I'm going to introduce Beth Tomlinson. And I think you've heard me say all these wonderful things about Beth, and now you get to hear from her. This is unbelievable. So Beth, take it away.
Thanks, Rob. And sadly, he just likes to embarrass me. He knows he knows talking like that embarrasses me, gets a blush on my cheek, and he enjoys it. So anyway, thank you, Rob, and thank you, Dana. That was amazing. And kudos to the succinctness, because it is complex stuff and it's layered stuff. And you did it powerfully and beautifully. And I also want to steal your slides. So I did see a couple of things in the chat. I just want to acknowledge first. We had tremendous response for this webinar. I think over 300 people registered. So we know a lot of folks want to join this webinar. We are in the process of sending out another Zoom link for those folks to be able to join. We will be recording. We are recording this video. We will make it available. We'll send the video link out to everyone that registered. We will also have the video link on our Resilient Lehigh Valley Handle with Care page for anybody to be able to access. And we will be emailing everybody that registered after today the video link, any resources we mentioned, as well as the PowerPoint slides. So just for you to know, those resources will be made available to everybody that registered. So my piece is really to explain what the heck Handle with Care is. The beauty of Handle with Care, I guess, stealing a line from Rob and Dana, is this common sense, right? It really is a very simple and actually inexpensive communication program between law enforcement and schools. So with Handle with Care, when police officers, who are also often our first responders, when they respond to a call and school-age children, teens are present, this is likely, not always, but likely something that would be traumatic for the child. Through Handle with Care, officers make a Handle with Care referral on that child to the child's school, and the school is then asked to handle that child with care through trauma-informed classroom practices, as well as connections to any support services that may be needed. And sometimes those support services like counseling or mental health services are needed, but a lot of times they're not. It really is things school staff can do to really make that child feel safe and supported. And as Dana was alluding to, feel safe so that their learning brain can kick in and they can engage in school. In the absence of a program like Handle with Care, children are often experiencing traumatic events in the home or community. They show up to school the next day, and the school has no clue until the child's behavior goes a bit sideways, right? Either with disruptive classroom behavior, aggressive behavior, absenteeism, really zoning out and kind of tuning out, self-harming behavior, grades dropping. Right, all things hurtful to the child and sometimes disruptive or hurtful to other children, certainly disruptive to the learning environment for all children, right? So for all those reasons, we started our Handle with Care program in Lehigh and Northampton County. We received a PCCD grant, so shout out to PCCD back in 2019 to really pilot this. We began by convening our district attorneys, DA Martin in Lehigh County and DA Houck in Northampton County, got their blessing. With partnership with our two district attorneys, we convene our police and school leaders across both counties to provide a kind of brief trauma 101, why this matters, like Dina spoke to, how this program functions, and really asked, are you interested? Do you think this fills some gaps? Do you think this is helpful to both systems? And it was a unanimous yes from both our law enforcement and our school leaders. And then when we started going a bit deeper to say, okay, well, so yes, this program, let's move forward with this program. How are we gonna share the Handle with Care referrals from law enforcement to schools? How are we gonna do that? And our school leaders unanimously said again, well, we have this amazing Safe to Say system that already exists, that's already mandated across all the schools, that already has established this kind of cascading communication system and procedures within each district and each school to share tips on student safety and wellness. So let's add the Handle with Care referral. Really made sense to us. We talked to our police leaders about, hey, does Handle with Care referrals and Safe to Say make sense? They also agreed, we're familiar with the system, we're already make referrals in the system, we're already kind of getting referrals through from schools to us through Safe to Say. So our police leaders in Lehigh Valley also agreed that makes perfect sense. And for any of you on this webinar that might not be familiar with Safe to Say, it is a youth violence prevention program run through the PA Attorney General's office and managed through the Attorney General's office Safe to Say Command Center and headed up by Brittany Klein. And she's been doing amazing, amazing work through the Safe to Say Command Center. And has been just a phenomenal partner in our Handle with Care pilot. So just want to really give praise and acknowledgement and recognition to Brittany's work. And with that, students, particularly, really the target for Safe to Say, but also parents and community members can also make anonymous calls to Safe to Say. I think they have a text. You can text it, you can website it, you can phone call it when someone is concerned about a threat of violence or self-harm with another student. Really was created out of the Sandy Hook Promise efforts to prevent school shootings. And what we've found to date, about 80,000 tips have been made to Safe to Say in Pennsylvania. So 80,000 tips, and I think it rolled out in 2020, right? 80,000 tips since then. And about 73% of those Safe to Say tips really focus on bullying, suicide, self-harm, and mental illness. So if you think about that, 3/4 of the referrals coming in are less about school safety or school shootings or school violence, and really more about mental and emotional wellness of our students. So it really just made sense for Handle with Care to referrals to really fall into that system, knowing it really is the goal of Handle with Care is really to give schools that heads up, that early proactive heads up, and for schools to really focus with the resources they have to really help that child feel a sense of safety, feel supported, be connected to any supports that they need, and really be able to engage in a safe and supportive learning environment and really help to heal. Right. We know through, as the brain can be healed by trauma, the brain is healed through relationships. And that's really where school staff have a lot of power in building some of those protective factors for kids and really helping them heal, build resiliency, and thrive. So knowing we wanted the Handle with Care referrals to go into the Safe to Say system, we then had to figure out how to do that. We thought it was going to be difficult and maybe expensive, and it turned out to be really easy and actually pretty inexpensive. We, through Brittany's help with the Safe to Say Command Center, we partnered with P3, which is the system that builds a Safe to Say website for Pennsylvania and manages that website. So we partnered with P3 to build a Handle with Care referral portal for law enforcement officers to make those referrals and for those referrals to end up in the Safe to Say system. And here's the shocker. It only costs $1,500 per county per year. $1,500 per county per year to have a county Handle with Care portal, right, to make those referrals. So really, really minimal cost. So we built this Handle with Care portal for both Lehigh and Northampton County, put all the police departments' information into those portals, built that portal, and now referrals through Lehigh and Northampton County go directly to the schools through their Safe to Say. The Handle with Care referrals show up as a type of event in the school's Safe to Say report every day. And it's really clear, Handle with Care really means the child was had some contact with law enforcement, which again could be domestic assault, could be some witnessing community violence, could be a really bad car accident or overdose of a family member. Lots of different things that our police and first responders are called to. Not all of them are crimes, right? Most of it likely something that would be traumatic for a child. So to date, we launched our pilot in Lehigh Valley, which is Lehigh and Northampton County. We launched our pilot in September 2020. And to date, we have close to 1,000 Handle with Care referrals. And we're still getting more and more police departments within our two counties bought in. We're still getting more and more awareness and buy-in at the officer level. So we only anticipate those referrals to increase. The last thing I wanted to say before kicking it off to the panel, we have created, and again, thanks to PCCD for supporting our pilot, we've created a lot of training, Handle with Care training materials. We have police tip cards that fit in your wallet. We have police Handle with Care tip referral, like laptop stickers that go on their laptops. We have created some training materials for law enforcement officers, as well as some Handle with Care training materials for schools. We have a promotional video that we're going to show in just a second. And all of these resources, please share and make your own. They're all available on a Resilient Lehigh Valley website on our Handle with Care tab. So just want to let you know that they're available. You can take them. You can, if you need a non-PDF version to add your county's logo or whatever, just reach out to me. We really have created them so that they can be shared and we really believe so much in this program. We would love to see it really ripple out across and expand across the state. So anything we can do and anywhere those training materials can go, we really encourage that. We also have a teacher tip sheet. If you receive a handle with care referral, like the do's, don'ts, and how to respond in a trauma-informed way as well. So lots of resources on the website. We encourage you to check them out and feel free to use them in your own communities. And so with that, I'm just going to queue up. We have a couple versions of this video, just so you know. We have an 8-minute officer roll call version of the video that really goes more detail into actually how officers make the referrals. But for now, and for today's purposes, we're going to show you our 4-minute video, which doesn't go too much into the detail of how to actually click here to make the referral, but really you'll hear from our school leaders, our DA leaders, and our police leaders, really how the Handle with Care program in the Lehigh Valley works. So Matt, if we could cue up that video.
Officers respond to calls involving children all the time. The City of Bethlehem Police Department is a 24/7 police department, so we respond on a daily basis.
In Whitehall Township, I think it's a rare day that an officer doesn't respond to some form of a call where a child is not present.
In the city of Allentown, we have a myriad of calls for service. So you have anything from domestic violence calls to more very serious calls where it's robbery or homicide.
The police often intervene in situations that are traumatic in nature, and while they do a good job, the family is left to deal with the aftermath of that, and especially the children.
As we've learned about trauma over the past several years and what that means, we realize that students and adults are affected by trauma in their life.
The traumatic events that we're talking about, by the way, aren't just crimes. They're auto accidents, they're anything. It affects the way a child approaches school. And when they come into school and they're acting differently, the tradition has been a negative one on the child.
When children experience trauma, they learn that the world and the adults around them aren't safe or predictable, and that has them kind of ready in that survival mode at any time, and that shows up in our schools.
At the core community function of policing is taking care of the people. The youngest of our society, they're the people that need the protection the most.
And as a community, we want to make sure that the children have that support.
Resilient Lehigh Valley is a community-driven effort to promote hope, healing, and resilience in youth, families, and communities through building a trauma-informed Lehigh Valley. Handle with Care is a very simple communication between schools and police to better support students exposed to trauma.
If an officer is responding to a call and there's a young person there, a kid, a child, the officer can make a referral.
A Handle with Care referral is very, very simple for an officer to do. They'll respond to a call for service. When they notice that a child is present, they'll go to the Safe to Say site. They'll enter that child's name and the school that they attend. And that's it. It's that simple.
It informs the district that a student has been exposed to a traumatic event, and we don't know what that event was, and that we need to handle this child with care.
There are a lot of things a school can do to become a safe and supportive environment through trauma-informed practices. They can make sure their staff are all trained in recognizing the signs and symptoms of trauma. They can have calming corners or peace corners in every classroom.
Supports could be as simple as giving that child something to eat, extended time on homework. It's really giving them the opportunity to feel good about themselves.
Well, we really started to get a lot of community buy-in for this program by really just talking to community partners. So we engage our schools, our police leaders, our county leaders, even our district attorneys, and that's really how we piloted the Handle with Care program.
Supporting our children leads to strong, resilient children that can deal with adversity, experience it, and know how to come out on top of it.
This builds a trust level with the children. I think it builds a trust level with the law enforcement as well as with the teachers. It works wonders because the teachers are now informed.
This is such an important initiative at United Way because it's all about supporting our kids. What are we as a society if we're not wrapping our arms around our kids and really helping them address any barriers in their way?
Just a quick kind of overview video of what it is, maybe some images of what some trauma-informed practices and classrooms look like, and really some messaging from our Lehigh Valley leaders that really are the magic and the power and the muscle behind our Handle with Care program. So now I'd like to introduce our panel of Handle with Care practitioners. We have some Lehigh County folks, and we also have some Somerset County folks on this panel. And so this is really like the heart and soul of this webinar, is really hearing from the folks actually doing Handle with Care, and asking them some questions to kind of hear their perspective on, why they champion this program, how it works, what they're seeing, and then we'll open up to all of you to ask questions as well. So as you're hearing from the different panelists as they're speaking, please start asking your questions in the chat, and we'll be pulling those questions out of the chat to then ask our panelists. So before we begin asking questions, I want to introduce them. We have Police Chief Charles Roca with the Allentown Police Department. We also have Chief Randy Cox of Somerset Borough Police Department. We have Deputy District Attorney Jeff Dimig with Lehigh County, and Claire Hogan, Chief People Services Officer with the Bethlehem Area School District. Thank you, Chiefs Roca and Cox and Deputy DA Dimig and Claire as well for joining us today and carving out some time. And maybe if we can, Maddie, put down the slide. There you go. There's Claire. So Claire, I'm going to start with you because as Dana started, this is really all about our kids. So as our school representative on the panel today, tasked with, helping our children build skills and learn and graduate ready for life and career success, I figured it made sense to start with you on the panel.
Okay.
So first, can you tell us just a little bit about, for those that may be not familiar with the Bethlehem Area School District, if you would just give us a little, kind of a little brief description of what the Bethlehem community is like.
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. Bethlehem Area School District is approximately 13,000 students, and we have the full gamut of families coming. We have families that are extremely poor and have extreme poverty, homelessness, to well affluent families. We are comprised of 22 schools within our district, 2 high schools, 4 middle schools, and 16 elementary schools, K through 5, 6 through 8, and obviously 9 through 12. We have approximately 60% of our families are economically disadvantaged. We've got about 10% of our population that have students that have a second language. We're about 14% special education identified. We bounce between the 5th and the largest school district. I think we're currently the 6th largest school district in the state of Pennsylvania. Allentown School District is our neighboring school district, as well as Easton on the other side of us. When we talk about Handle with Care, we handled overall within our Safe to Say system, our number of Handle with Care referrals that came into us last year was approximately 143, 145. We are currently for this school year at 38. We truly believe in this process, this system, to give support to our students.
Thanks, Claire. Thanks, guys. I think it's always helpful when you're hearing from somebody from a community that you're not familiar with to kind of have the context of that community. Now, I know the Bethlehem Area School District has made a commitment to adopting a trauma-informed approach at a district level. Can you tell us what that looks like and what positive outcomes or impact you see with that approach?
Sure. We have really embraced trauma-informed practices, approaches. all of our districts, all of our schools, excuse me, have been trained. I think one of the things that we have switched our approach is, instead of looking at our different initiatives in silos, we are really focusing on embedding all of our initiatives through our academic process, because we know our ultimate goal here is to educate our children, but unless their social emotional skills are on par, and we're providing that instruction. So we have a national recognition for our RBG3 reading initiative at the elementary level. We embed our trauma-informed approaches and practices, our restorative practices, our social emotional learning, through all of that academic training that we also are doing with our staff. All right, so we're really looking at that embedded model. When you go through our schools, you will see from our training, there's clear expectations that are set. We have peace corners in the majority of our classrooms. Some buildings have staff peace rooms. We have 1 or 2 buildings that, in addition to having a peace corner in the classroom, there is actually a designated space within the building for students to go to receive support. Both high schools, we have opened up a wellness center at both of our high schools that provides, for example, that separate peace room versus just a peace corner in the classroom. I mentioned before that we are restorative practices. We have created our own cohort of trainers so that we can continue to build that capacity and sustain RP. Right now, RP is at the secondary level, and this year we've really focused on bringing that down into
Real
the
quick,
elementary
RP is
level.
restorative practices.
Sorry, restorative practices, which is focusing in on building positive relationships with students. So when I believe, as Dana stated earlier, that along with Beth, is when we have those positive relationships with kids, they feel safe, they come in, they talk to us, and you can move along with academics as well as the emotionality of the students. So everything is integrated throughout the day. And I think that that's a real big, why we've been successful across the board in a lot of our initiatives.
That's amazing, Claire. And I imagine any educators on the call today might follow up with you to learn more. So district was already making a commitment to trauma-informed schools, already piloting this trauma-informed school model for a bit. And then we added in Handle with Care to that. So can you talk a little bit about how Handle with Care, how adding in Handle with Care and that kind of early heads up about students that may have been exposed to something traumatic has been helpful to BASD educators?
So when we began to initiate Handle with Care, we already had the Safe to Say up and running, right? So it was that system was familiar with our building administrators. We have a core of 5 central office administrators that receive the initial notification from Safe to Say, and then typically it is our school safety supervisor that sends the notification off to the building administrator, confirms that it's indeed one of our students, sends it off to the administrator of that building. That administrator then identifies the guidance counselor and the key individuals for that student to say, we've gotten a Handle with Care notification. So we know that when we get that referral, or that notification, what is our main goal? Our main goal is to provide a non-threatening strategies or interventions to that student so that they are feeling safe, because we don't know what that trauma was. And it allows us to be proactive. So when a student is coming in very dysregulated, it allows us to say, okay, it's not that this child's trying to be difficult, in the classroom, but there is something that is causing them to feel and act this way. And so it allows our staff to take a step back, be proactive, not reactive in a negative way, but reactive in a more positive, nurturing, caring, supportive manner. And our goal is to not discipline that student, but to observe and provide the necessary supports to that student. It's natural for people to want to know, well, what happened? I want to know the specifics. And I would say that that's one of the biggest areas that we've really had to work on with the staff, to say, you don't need to know the specifics. All you need to know is, how is that child responding and what supports do they need in order to be successful?
Thanks, Clara. Really, really, really helpful. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions headed your way when we open it up to the Q&A from the audience. And really, Bethlehem Area School District is just within the state of Pennsylvania, just such a phenomenal example of a collaborative partner in community, and a district that really has really truly embraced that commitment to trauma-informed practices as well as equity as well. So just a huge shout out to the Bethlehem Area School District.
Thank you.
So moving on to the district attorney perspective, right? We have Deputy District Attorney Jeff Dimming with Lehigh County. And Jeff, you really were my point person with Lehigh County early on in this process to say, can we do this? How can we do this within confidentiality laws and everything else? And so you've really been with this pilot from ground zero, at least for the Lehigh Valley pilot. And really DA Martin especially has been such a strong and steady champion of this program. From the district attorney perspective, why did Handle with Care make sense to you?
Well, I think I'd echo a lot of what Claire just talked about. I heard her mention, the ability for teachers to be proactive with information flow. And I think that's what we saw this at our level. At the end of the day, we're sort of at the end of the line of the system of criminal justice. And so, unfortunately, I can tell you, it's interesting. We have, when we have a defendant in adult court, a judge can order what we call a pre-sentence investigation. And that's a rather pretty deep dive into someone's background to inform the court about, how they want to try to sentence this person and what type of resources to try to get wrapped around them. But what that does is it allows you to look at their history and get to read through something like that. And I can tell you, having done this for quite a period of time at this point, almost everyone in the criminal justice system has a history of trauma. And so that's true as well, and probably even more so in the juvenile system here in Lehigh County. And so we recognize that, and we all know what untreated trauma looks like. And in many ways, it results in criminal behavior and decision-making down the line. So I think the district attorney, we feel that if we could support this to help schools become informed about issues that are happening out in the law enforcement community, make schools aware of that. If we could streamline that, get support for that in Lehigh County, use our influence with school districts and local law enforcement agencies to get them on board, working with great people from with like Beth Tomlinson here to get those things done. She did all the heavy lifting, but we at least helped broadcast that to stakeholders in the community. And I think we were successful as a whole team in getting that to happen.
Thanks, Jeff. And don't be so humble here. We really got such value, tremendous value. I don't think we could have lifted off. Well, I won't say we couldn't have. I don't think we could have. I will state that we could not have lifted off this pilot without such strong support and endorsement with the DA's offices. Lehigh County DA, as well as Northampton County DA, but really helped endorse this with law enforcement. So got, law enforcement, police chiefs to really pay attention, value this. You were already convening our school and police leaders around school safety. We added Handle with Care, you know what I mean, planning, convening, problem solving into those meetings, even help broker getting some handbook care referral information by police department, by quarter from the Safe to Say Command Center. So DA's office in Lehigh County has just been tremendously helpful and really collaborative partner from day one with this pilot. So you had a bit of a humble brag, so I'm just gonna call that out for you. And I think for any maybe particularly law enforcement and certainly any DA folks on the call today, there's always some issues, some concerns and question around the legality of what information can be shared, how can it be shared, and concerns, you know, come up when it's information about victims or information coming out of law enforcement. So we were really careful to start. Thanks to the guidance from our district attorneys and honoring the national hand with care model out of West Virginia, that we didn't share any details of the incident. The hand with care referral only says the name of the child's school, and the officer's badge number to really verify that is a legitimate hand with care referral. Optional information would be the child's grade and date of birth. And that's really, you know, just to verify it's this child, not this child in the school, but there are no details provided. And that was really important to start it. From your perspective with the DA's office, were there any other concerns, you know, when we were starting to get this going, were there any other questions or concerns that came to mind that we really need to problem solve through or talk through that might be helpful for other you know, prosecutors or DAs on the call to hear?
Sure. Yeah, and just on your last point, I do think, you know, the district attorney's office in the 67 counties in Pennsylvania, you know, oftentimes do have those connections with both school districts because of the large number of school resource officers that we're involving with law enforcement. So we generally have, you know, a tie to local leadership in school districts. And then, of course, we have a tie to the chiefs of police of the law enforcement agencies in our counties. And so for those folks out there who are interested in trying, I do think the district attorney's office is a great, but Beth recognized that early on. And for folks that are working on this, I do think the DA's office can be might not be the first thought you would have that would be a great resource to help kick these types of things off, but they can really use their influence to bring people together to get these things going and get that momentum going, and then people just take it from there. Yeah, Beth is absolutely right. I mean, our main concern, as I recall early on, was mainly just, look, we deal with a statute called CREA that doesn't allow for basically law enforcement reports to go out to anybody other than law enforcement. So, I mean, pretty large no-no if you're sending information that the law enforcement is gathering, even if it's obviously in this case for a very good reason that you want to share this information with folks. It's you cannot, and we run into that with our school resource officers and school districts. Again, we always wanted to do the right thing, but we again have to be careful. People are embedded in the buildings, and sometimes information flow. We have to be careful about what exactly is being told. So that was the flag that we sort of had. Other than that, we didn't really see a whole lot of issues beyond that, but that was one concern that we had, and we wanted to make sure that we had a tight lid on that. And again, Beth worked really well with us to make sure that the school districts understood that, the local law enforcement. We created this reporting system. I still think I remember Beth Thomason telling us that the AG's office was going to, you know, incorporate this into their Safe to Say program. And I thought that is never going to happen. You know, that's a big lift, but she did. And so, and then we were able to, you know, streamline that down to, you know, the information that would not be violative of CREA. So everybody stays above board and not get in trouble in that way. And so it's been a good thing. And one other thing in Lehigh County that we had that it may be difficult for other counties to replicate, but possibly through their Mark 43 or their various reporting systems of their law enforcement, you know, we put that now a Safe to Say and a handle with care, you know, sort of tag in the police report itself so that we can now track this data, which I know is always really important for grant purposes and other, you know, make sure that we're being successful and that we're reaching all the various law enforcement agencies in our county so we can track whether the number of these things happening and the flow of them. So that was something we were also able to do through the DA's offices, again, with the help and suggestion of Beth to help us facilitate the ability to collect data in and around this information. As we all know, nobody really likes data, but that sort of drives the world of grants and funding these days. And so it's important that we're able to track our success. And I think, again, the DA's offices often have resources that perhaps, that others may not have. And if you can get creative, you can help support these things and be a greater success.
Thanks, Jeff. Really, really, really helpful. And thank you from being such a strong champion and supporter and advocate for this program, really from day one and continuing. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Beth.
And I wanted to end with Chiefs Cox and Roca, because Handle with Care begins with our police officers, right? It's really first asking the officers to think a little differently, right? And act differently and actually make these referrals and kind of have that mindset about the traumatic nature of whatever brought them to the incident and the impact on children. So, the initial heavy lift really is that police officer taking the time to make the Handle with Care referral. And then the second part is really schools responding to that referral and really supporting that child through trauma-informed practices and again, connection to additional support. So not last and least, but last and most important, ending this practitioner panel with our police chiefs. So just to begin, Chief Cox and Roca, you're both in very different communities. Do you want to talk a little bit, if those folks aren't familiar with Allentown or Somerset County, briefly what those two communities were like?
Chief, I'll defer to you. Go right ahead.
Thank you, sir. I was going to say the same thing.
I beat you to it.
Well, thank you. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here today. One of the things I used to talk about when I would attend, and I still do, the various community meetings is about community engagement and how we can do a better job of being champions for various topics. And I think one of those things is collaboration. In the Allentown city, we are a city of a population of 125,000 by census, but I will submit to you that we are much more. Our community is over 56% Latino, with many speaking Spanish as their first language, which is key because you have to be able to communicate and folks have to understand what's going on or to even say what's happening. The city of Allentown, we have over 200 police officers in the city. I'm very honored and humbled to be the chief of police in this city of which I grew up in, and I attended the Allentown School District. Claire was absolutely correct of the identifying how Bethlehem was. Allentown is very similar and consistent with that, where we have a level of poverty and some that are very affluent. In incorporating Handle with Care, safe to say, it began during the time of the year 2020, which I think we can all agree was a very trying year, not only with COVID, but more recently, also with the George Floyd incident that really had a substantial impact on law enforcement. And that's something that speaks to how do we go and make things better, not just as a police department, as educators, as law people or teachers or whatever organization you're in. How do we work together and what do we do to make sure that our most important asset is protected and is given support when they're dealing with very traumatic situations? And, when Handle with Care came along, it's a phenomenal program, and the overview that was given is about how do we get that piece of connection with the young person that may have exhibited or seen, a domestic violence situation that happened and the police coming on scene. I can relate to you. When I was 4 years old, I lived on the south side of our city in apartments, and I can recall this would have been 1979, so you can tell how old I am, there was a cruiser that came up. It was two police officers that came out, and I saw their uniform, and I was kind of taken aback because I'm like, what did I do wrong, right? And one of the things that they talked about was making that connection. And Handle with Care, how I'm relaying that is that we have the ability now, and it's a very simple process, that if an officer goes to a location and a child is present and they witness some form of call, they can make that referral right away. And it's a simple process of writing it in your report. As Attorney Dimick said about making the event statistic in our record management system, it's simply a checkbox. We put it in there. All the reports get reviewed daily by our youth division, and they then submit that through the Safe to Say system. And if you're thinking, wow, that's a lot to go through, it's a very simple process. Chief Cop from Bethlehem on the video that you heard before said it best. It's very simple. It doesn't take anything. You fill out the little drop-down menus and you send it to the schools, and the school gets it, and they just know it's an awareness of, okay, we need to take our time and handle this kid with care. Perhaps he needs a rest. Many in the Allentown School District are coming from poverty, and we want to be able to ensure that that asset right there, that those children know that they have a future and they have a path to go forward. I was not born with silver spoon in my mouth. My mother worked in a sewing machine factory growing up, and I can imagine the young people and some of the obstacles that they have and how to overcome that. And so as a police department, I am very motivated and dedicated to this this way of handling with care. And we began our program in October of 2020. We put it out. We initially had our youth sergeant go over to our musters, which is basically our staffing meetings, and go over it with all our patrol officers so they're aware of how to do it, what a handle with care referral looks like, and how to submit it. And then we also were able to get great support from Beth Tomlinson and her team from United Way to provide those little so-called cheat sheets so that we can see exactly what to do. And then if there's something that we need to change or fix, we do so. And it's about that process that we implemented here in Allentown. And for the officers, it's an ask. It's something additional that they would have to do. But it's not just about working in silos. That's one thing that I want to get across to the community here is like, we need to be able to collaborate and network and be able to go across barriers to ensure, because each of us are serving the same population, right? And with that in mind, we know that now a teacher coming in will get this referral. They'll be able to take a look at it, look that Charlie Roca experienced some trauma here. I'm not quite sure what it is, and we're not really going to question him about it, but we're going to be able to provide that supportive environment and have that child know that, you know what, you're going to find some comfort, and that's going to start the process to healing. I said in the video that it's going to help prepare those skill sets that are going to be able for them to become mature adults and to be able to overcome and adapt to various situations that they're going to run into in their life.
Thanks, Chief Roca. That was really beautiful and powerful and eloquent. And I love how you tied in your own lived experience. Really appreciate that. Chief Cox, if you want to talk a little bit about Somerset County and how Hand with Care works in Somerset County.
Sure. Well, Somerset County, Somerset Borough is probably has a lot of differences from your home area of the Lehigh Valley. Somerset County itself is a sixth class county, a county of the sixth class. Our total population in the county is probably around 80,000 people. Somerset Borough is at the center of Somerset County. It's a county seat. We have a permanent population of less than 8,000. However, our daily population spikes to about probably somewhere around 60,000 a day. As a result of that, we have 20 police officers. We are part of the Somerset Area School District. Somerset Area School District is made up of 4 municipalities, 3 townships, and Somerset Borough. The school district has a student population of about 2,500. Somerset Borough is kind of unique because we're a little bit different from the rest of the county because we tend to be a population hub of the county. We're the county seat. We're the gateway to 3 different ski resorts. The Flight 93 Memorial is right outside of Somerset. We also are a turnpike interchange. Piece of trivia for you all: we're the only turnpike interchange that sits in a borough in the Commonwealth. Just a little bit of trivia to keep it really interesting. And we also have 2 state prisons in our backyard. So we have quite a transient on the move population that most towns our size without those laws would not necessarily have. As far as Handle with Care goes, probably through my involvement with HEAL PA, I came across the concept of Handle with Care probably late 2020. I contacted our superintendent of our school district about it, and we have the Borough Police have a very close relationship with the school district. We provide the SROs for the school district, except we do it in a little bit of a different way. All of our officers are certified as SROs, and all of our patrol officers function as SROs on a rotating basis, as opposed to the traditional model where an officer is assigned to a school for the entire school year, and that's who they see. Here we rotate all of our officers through. And I should mention too, we also, with Handle with Care, as far as the sharing of information, we also rely on the memorandum of understanding we have with the school district, because all of our officers serve as SROs. But I approached the superintendent and said, hey, here's this idea. I think it would be neat to try. And her response was, that sounds good. She said, but I think that your officers intuitively already do this, but it certainly can't hurt anything. So we got the policy together, made sure all the paperwork was in place, worked on the IT part of it also, because we handle the collection of information and making referrals within our own database. And we launched it on February 11th, 2021. And just to give you an idea how both the superintendent and I were both wrong about how intuitive our officers were, since September 11th, 2021 to date, we've made about 160 Handle with Care notifications. Now that involves one police department dealing with the student population in our jurisdiction in one school district. And I think those numbers are really telling, because I think it paints a picture out there of just how often kids are experiencing trauma and just how often officers are able to notice that. Chief Rocca and mentioned about how much time it takes. We actually timed it from the time our officers access the notification. It takes them about 2 minutes to complete that notification. So from the time they log into the database to the time they log out of the database and make that referral, it takes about 2 minutes. A supervisor then reviews the every entry made in by the officers, and our goal is, before the school bell rings the next morning, the school district will be in possession of that information and be able to prepare themselves to assist those kids. When we send our notifications out, every notification goes to the superintendent of the district and also to the building principal, and then that information is shared with the staff on a need to know basis. Usually, the guidance counselors, especially at the elementary level, with the teacher who's going to be dealing with that child for most of the day. Probably as far as I very keep track of the feedback from the school district, and probably one of the things the high school guidance counselor said to me is probably the best way to sum up our experience, or their experience with Handle with Care. He said that, before Handle with Care, when the kids came into the school and they were suffering, the folks at the school knew this, but it may take them 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks to learn why they were suffering. With Handle with Care, they have a very basic idea of what happened, and they can prepare themselves to start to deal with that kid and start to offer those services, which, by the way, already exist in the school district. They already exist within the school structure. So it's not like they had to invent anything else either. and it works for the benefit of the kids. It's as far as cost goes, I can tell you, again, we did more or less a standalone program, except for some soft costs from devising the policy, devising the training, having IT add the reporting mechanism into our database. Those are soft costs that cost us really nothing. There were no costs attached to it other than those soft costs. People were doing things that they were already being paid to do. And again, as far as how much the officer's time it takes, it's very minimal.
Thanks, Chief Cox. Really, really helpful. And I know we're a little bit over time, and I apologize. The tech challenges of switching to a new Zoom link ate up a good bit of our time. And I do want to be respectful of folks' time. So I think I'm going to kick it back to you, Rob, to close. And just as a reminder to everybody, we will edit both recordings from both Zoom links to put it all together. Send that out, send out the Handle with Care PowerPoint slides, any links we referenced, and contact info as well for folks to follow up with. And I'll kick it your way, Rob.
Beth, before you kick it to Rob, could I say one more thing? A couple times I alluded to the fact that there's policy involved, there's training involved. And I'm throwing this out to any law enforcement folks out there who may not already be involved in with Handle with Care. You are more than welcome. I'll give you our policy. I'll give you our testing instruments, our training instruments. I'm sure, Beth, you can, if someone wants those, you can facilitate the contact. But it's, again, very simple process, and thank you.
Great. So thanks, Chief Cox. Thank you, Beth. Thanks to all of the panelists. I hope that people are at the very least extremely intrigued by this program. And again, whether you say it's commonsensical, I think, frankly, I would go even further. It's a no-brainer. I think it's important for school districts and the law enforcement to come together and speak about this and to implement a Handle with Care program. I don't know if there's a slide or not, and I know, again, we're going over time, but just a couple of things as we wrap up. On the law enforcement side, I just want you to know that you can reach out to me, and I believe that Beth will and Lehigh Valley folks will include a follow-up email which will have my contact information. But I'm happy to talk to you more about Handle with Care if you want any information. Certainly that is, one of the things that we have actually talked about within the HEAL PA criminal justice effort as a recommendation that everyone implement, or we make available to everyone across the state, Handle with Care. The other is on the subject of trauma more generally, we in HEAL PA can work with folks within your communities on getting you appropriate training on Handle with Care. And with respect to law enforcement, I will tell you that as it is now required by statute that all law enforcement officials receive training on trauma. This was Act 59. It went into effect a couple of years ago after George Floyd, and the legislature passed legislation. There is a curriculum. It is not a 15-minute curriculum, so well done by Dana, but it is a 4-hour presentation. And if you can even think of the idea of spending 4 hours with me, I am happy to come to your community to do the training. And so there's also, educators are required to be trained in trauma. That's also part of statute. So the bottom line is we are trying to push out this idea of creating trauma-informed systems, trauma-informed education, trauma-informed law enforcement. And as part of that, you have this Handle with Care effort. I would not wait for the final training for these let's say the larger trainings. I think you could implement Handle with Care more quickly. But again, I just want you to know that there are these trainings available. feel free to contact me. I know Beth is always available. I'd throw you under the bus. And the HEAL PA folks are also available. So with that, I want to thank everybody who participated in this. I want to thank Beth once again for making sure that this actually came to be. And I want to thank everyone who's on the call. Happy New Year again. Be well, be safe, and we look forward to hearing from you and hope that your efforts to implement a trauma-informed system and handle with care are successful within your communities. Thank you very much.